As the snow kept falling, the man yanked desperately on the car door handle. It wouldn't budge, time was slipping away, and the cold was closing in fast. He slammed his fists against the frosted windows, hoping against hope they might shatter. But it was no use. A thick wall of snow had entombed his car, sealing him inside. Trapped, alone, the temperature outside plummeted. A chilling realization hit him. He had to get out. This wasn't just a fight against the snow, it was a fight for survival. On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we'll reveal the extraordinary story of Peter Skyllberg, the man who was trapped for 60 days in a frozen car. No one really knows where Peter Skyllberg was heading on the 14th of December 2011 when he turned the key in his car's ignition. But what is known is where he ended up: Umeå. Located in the northeast of Sweden, Umeå is 250 miles south of the Arctic Circle, a region shaped by its subarctic climate. The summers are typically fairly warm and don't last very long, but the winters are a different story. They are much longer, unrelenting, and freezing cold. But as Peter Skyllberg was about to find out, they could become a fight for survival. After setting off, Skyllberg drove along the E4, one of the main highways slicing through the north of the country toward Umeå. As Skyllberg approached the turnpike, he missed a crucial bend in the road. It's unclear if this was deliberate, a calculated attempt to crash his car, or if it was the treacherous conditions that caused him to lose control. Maybe he simply pulled over, intending to take a break and recharge before continuing his journey. Whatever the reason, this decision would mark the beginning of an extraordinary and harrowing ordeal. Whether knocked unconscious by the crash or simply waking up from a roadside nap, Peter Skyllberg soon found himself in a living nightmare. Around 3 feet of snow had fallen, smothering the car and burying Skyllberg inside it. Desperate to escape, Peter frantically tried to open up the car and get out. It was a futile attempt. The doors had frozen shut. He slammed his fists against the windshield, but a thick blanket of snow piled on top made escape impossible. Skyllberg was trapped, unable to get out of the cramped, claustrophobic confines of his car. It had become a frozen tomb. If he had screamed for help, Skyllberg's desperate pleas would have been suffocated by the thick wall of packed snow. He managed to pry the sunroof open slightly, but not enough to crawl through it to freedom, and certainly not enough to make his cries for help heard by passers-by, if there were any. Peter was stuck in a small, isolated area off the main highway. Even if there were people around, few would have stopped for a seemingly innocuous mound of snow, a normal part of the winter landscape. Heavy snow continued to fall. If Peter managed to leave the vehicle and tried to find help on foot, Skyllberg would have been at the mercy of the icy conditions. In a cruel twist of fate, that same car that trapped him was his only lifeline. As the winter sun dipped below the horizon, darkness and biting cold crept over the car. It was obvious that no rescue was coming. With much of the light from outside blocked by the snow, the first indicator of nightfall was temperatures dropping even lower. Outside, it got as low as negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, only a few degrees short of the lowest recorded temperature for Umeå in December. At temperatures that low, it's possible for a person to freeze to death within a matter of hours. For Skyllberg, survival hinged on a single stroke of luck, something hidden somewhere in the backseat of his car. He rummaged through the clutter that littered the backseat, his fingers trembling from the cold, and then he found it: a sleeping bag, tightly packed into a drawstring carry case. With trembling fingers, he pulled the bag free. He slipped inside, zipping it all the way up and ensuring no heat could escape. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. His first line of defense against the lethal cold. Most sleeping bags are made from durable polyester or nylon, materials that are not only water repellent but also excellent at trapping body heat. The secret lies in their insulation. Many are lined with synthetic quilt insulation, which is lightweight, highly effective at retaining warmth, and resistant to absorbing water, a critical feature in freezing conditions. For Skyllberg, this could have made all the difference. The sleeping bag didn't just shield him from the cold, it trapped the heat his body produced, creating a life-saving barrier between him and the deadly Arctic chill. This isn't enough to keep sub-freezing temperatures at bay, and it's not the sole reason that Peter Skyllberg was able to stay alive in the cold. But it certainly would have helped. Of course, by the time he awoke the next morning, after a freezing cold night's sleep, he'd be faced with a new problem: hunger. When Skyllberg woke up, he was still trapped in the car. He had no food or water. For the human body, survival without food is possible for a few weeks, but water is far more critical. Without it, death can occur in just 3 to 5 days. If water is available, the body can sustain itself for much longer, sometimes up to 3 months. But there's no universal rule. Survival depends on the circumstances faced by the individual. Through the small crack in the sunroof, Peter managed to scoop handfuls of snow each day. While he couldn't clear enough to free himself, he could reach just enough to sustain himself. While it might not have been the same as getting a full meal in, it was better than nothing. The water he was able to ingest from the snow kept his body hydrated, even if it made him feel cold. What happened next is still a bit of a mystery. Speculation surrounds how Peter Skyllberg managed to survive his ordeal. It's possible a combination of factors worked together to keep him alive against the odds. One theory is that his body began to gradually shut down. Not entirely, although slipping into a coma at such low temperatures is not uncommon. Some believe that Skyllberg was able to avoid this, though, and instead his body entered into a sort of survival mode. He began slipping in and out of a deep, near hibernation-like sleep. Occasionally, he would just wake long enough to scoop a handful of snow, keeping himself hydrated before drifting off back to sleep. The human body can naturally lower its internal temperature. It's rarely by more than a few degrees. The addition of the sleeping bag, however, could have been a vital factor in helping his internal temperature stay consistent throughout these extended periods of deep survival mode sleep. But there is one other big factor that could have been contributing to help his chances of survival: the igloo effect. Igloos are structures made of ice and snow, commonly associated with the Inuit people in the Arctic and the subarctic regions of North America. While it's not exactly warm inside, the specific design of the igloos prevents the cold from outside being let in. This accumulated heat is trapped inside, keeping the occupants at least warm enough to survive if they're wearing the right clothes. The igloo effect occurs due to two factors: insulation and body heat. An igloo can keep its interior significantly warmer than the freezing temperatures outside. This happens because of the unique structure of the snow itself. Snow is essentially a lattice of tiny ice crystals with air pockets trapped between them. These air pockets give snow its remarkable thermal insulation properties, but there's a balance to maintain. If the snow blocks are too thick, they reduce the number of air pockets, which can cause the igloo to trap too much heat. This leads to excessive warming inside and potentially melting. It's thought that the snow around Peter Skyllberg's vehicle was the right thickness to essentially turn the car into a makeshift igloo. The same thing keeping him trapped was also keeping the interior of the car insulated against the conditions outside. This meant that the negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit conditions surrounding the vehicle were being negated somewhat by what little heat was being held inside. This, combined with the sleeping bag and the clothes Skyllberg was wearing, helped keep his body temperature at a consistently high enough level to survive. On average, the human body's temperature stays at around 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Skyllberg was found with a body temperature of 71 degrees Fahrenheit, thanks to the various factors keeping the car insulated. The igloo effect might have been keeping him from freezing to death, at least for a while, but without proper food and clean water, he was lucky to have lasted as long as he had. Any longer trapped in the vehicle, and Peter Skyllberg would have faced a slow, agonizing death. Surviving on nothing but snow for weeks on end would have left his body starved of essential nutrients, leading him to severe malnutrition. Over time, his strength would have faded, and the relentless cold would have taken its toll. While snow is primarily made of water, as it freezes, the intricate lattice of snow acts as a microscopic net. This can catch all sorts of pollutants from the atmosphere, including black carbon released by coal-firing power plants and any wood-burning fires. That's not to mention all the pesticides from the soil and other harmful bacteria substances, including microplastics, dirt, chemicals, and even feces. Experts generally believe that a human can survive between 1 and 2 months without food, provided they have access to water. This isn't a strict rule, as survival depends heavily on individual circumstances, but water plays a critical role in keeping the body functioning. In extreme cases, the body will begin to burn through its fat reserves to sustain itself during prolonged periods without proper food. Some doctors speculate that this process may have helped Peter Skyllberg endure such a lengthy ordeal, surviving on nothing but snow for weeks. But while that might have provided him with water, it almost certainly wasn't sanitary. Unless someone managed to find him, Peter Skyllberg wasn't likely to last much longer. And by some miracle, that's what happened. In February of 2012, 2 friends out in snowmobiles had been riding through the area when one of them spotted something. There was a huge mound of snow a short distance away, only around 1 mile from the turnpike. It seemed to be the complete wrong shape and size to be a fallen tree. And besides, it was too far from the nearby tree line. It could have been an animal carcass, but it was far too big for anything native to the area. Approaching with caution, the friends moved closer to investigate. It didn't take long for the two friends to realize that beneath this mound of snow was a car. Their first thought was grim. The heavy snowfall had caused the vehicle to run off the road, trapping someone who could be injured or worse, dead inside. The best-case scenario was that the car was abandoned, left behind after breaking down near the E4. But neither of them could shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. They had to know for sure. Through the blurry frost, there was no sign of movement, no shadow, no flicker of life. From what they could tell, the car appeared still, but a grim, ominous feeling hung in the bitterly cold air as the two dismounted from their snowmobiles and approached on foot. As their boots crunched through the snow, they noticed something unsettling. There were no footprints around the car, other than their own. The area was untouched, as if the vehicle had been abandoned for weeks or longer. Carefully, the two men began brushing away the snow, their hands working methodically to clear the frosted windows. Slowly, they revealed just enough to peer inside. Through the glass, they can make out the faint outline of objects scattered around the interior. A takeaway cup, long since emptied, a pair of sunglasses useless in the biting cold, and a small stuffed animal swaying gently from the rearview mirror. The interior of the vehicle had a thin layer of frost over it. The dashboard and steering wheel were coated in tiny crystals of ice that reached up the upholstery, covering everything from the seats to the foot pedals. Then one of the snowmobile riders noticed something on the rear passenger seats of the car, bundled up in a sleeping bag. A chill ran down the rider's spine. Whatever's inside that sleeping bag, it isn't good. The rider knocked against the window, knowing deep down if it was a body, it wouldn't move. But to his surprise, it does. Startled, the two snowmobile riders quickly realized that this driver of the car was still alive. Police and emergency services rushed to the scene. In a few moments, they were able to dig through almost a meter of snow to reach the car. Having reached the doors, rescuers were able to pry the frozen vehicle open and discover an emaciated figure. Weak, malnourished, and barely able to speak more than a few sentences, Peter Skyllberg was carried out of the car. He had been trapped for a total of 61 days. He had not eaten food since the 19th of December. He'd spent Christmas of 2011 and New Year's Day of 2012 inside the icy car. While the rest of Sweden and the rest of the world celebrated, one man was left alone and freezing, uncertain if he would survive. As Peter Skyllberg was rushed to Norrlands University Hospital for specialist care, police began a meticulous search of his snowbound car. Inside, they uncovered a collection of seemingly random items: soft drink bottles, cigarette packs, skin ointment, comic books, and, of course, a life-saving sleeping bag. Outside, the snow told its own story. There were no footprints leading to or from the car, reinforcing the idea that Skyllberg had been stranded there for weeks. The few hand imprints they were able to find left in the snow, backing up Skyllberg's eventual story about eating the snow to survive. The evidence painted a grim but remarkable picture of survival. After he was taken to the hospital, he refused to participate in interviews about his experience with any news outlets, but stories of depression and huge debt emerged. All he asked was that the public be made aware that he was alive and recovering. Most of the details about the state of both Skyllberg and his vehicle come from Ebba Nyberg, a local police officer involved in the rescue efforts, and Dr. Ulf Segerberg, who was the chief medical officer at Norrlands University Hospital, where Peter Skyllberg was treated. It has never been made clear exactly how he came to find himself stranded on a deserted snowy lane for 2 months, and even with all the understanding of the igloo effect, not everything fully adds up. Dr. Segerberg was even reported as being skeptical about the whole thing. The doctor had never seen another case like it, and while he admitted to not being an expert in body temperatures, reported that it was unusual for human beings to lower their body temperature by more than a few degrees. Dr. Segerberg pointed out that if the body's internal temperature drops too far below those few degrees, then a person can lose consciousness and even slip into a coma. He also called 2 months the upper limit of the amount of time a human could theoretically survive without food. But while many outdoor experts and other enthusiastic doctors were quick to hail Skyllberg's survival, there were those far less willing to believe the story. One of the rescuers has since claimed that while the car was buried under a lot of snow, it was never frozen shut. Allegedly, Peter Skyllberg could have very easily escaped any time he wanted to. The only one who could answer the question is Skyllberg, and for now, he is yet to deliberate any further on his incredible story of survival. What are your thoughts on Peter Skyllberg's story? A feat of incredible endurance or a fabricated stunt? What would you have done in his situation? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments. Now go check out I Was Trapped in a 30-inch Oil Pipe, or click on this video instead.